Welcome back to the Lars Larson Show. Glad to get your phone calls and your emails at 866-439-5277. Emails go to talk@larslarson.com. And Byron Henry joins me now, an attorney and a constitutional scholar, to talk about a rather thorny issue that's popped up in Georgia. How are you doing, Mr. Henry?
Great. Glad to be with you.
So tell me this. The question comes up whether or not Muslim women should be allowed to wear a burqa when they go get their driver's license photos taken. One state is proposing a bill to stop that. I think other states have had a whole variety of reactions, haven't they?
Yes, there's been a lot of outcry. Generally, a general applicable law such as that you can't cover your face when you get your driver's license picture taken or for other identification purposes would not otherwise run afoul of religious protections under the Constitution. Generally, because we know that under Supreme Court precedent that generally applicable laws such as you can't smoke peyote and other laws, as long as they're applicable to everybody, they don't violate your religious freedom if they're applied generally and not targeted towards one group.
Right.
Unfortunately, this law here has been reported as actually targeting Muslim women, but it in fact doesn't. It simply amends the law in Georgia to fix the old KKK or Ku Klux Klan law that barred wearing hoods and masks in certain purposes and had the gender-specific pronoun he, and it just amended that to include she so that it covered everyone about wearing masks in public and whatnot, was designed for public safety.
Well, and in fact, isn't the government generally allowed to make laws that have to do with safety? That is, if you say we're going to forbid a certain kind of practice because it has to do with safety, the government has a lot more latitude to do that than it does just a law that doesn't have any direct connection to safety, right?
That's correct, and there's two exceptions to that. The Supreme Court has said if you can show that the law was drafted neutrally, but it was actually put on the books specifically to target a specific religion, such as animal sacrifices law in some places, where it was specifically put on the books to get at certain religions, including Santeria, that may be unconstitutional. And the other instance, and this comes up nowadays because we have a lot of dispute over these religious freedom restoration bills, but in the 21 states that have religious freedom protection acts in the state, even general laws such as this law that burden someone's religious freedom, it would put the burden back on the government to show that this law is necessary. So if a Muslim woman wanted to wear her covering to get her driver's license photo taken, I think the government probably could show a compelling interest, but it would be on the government the burden to show a compelling interest, which in this case would be public safety and identification for driver's license purposes.
I'm talking to Byron Henry, who's an attorney and constitutional scholar. Let me ask you about two things. First, doesn't it fly in the face of the very purpose of photo ID to say you can take photo ID if, with a head covering that prevents anybody from being able to see your face? Then the photo ID is meaningless. And secondly, if we were to make an exception and say, well, we can't tell people who are followers of a particular faith, in effect, we'd be carving out a special privilege for people of a certain faith. In the same way that if we said, when banks loan money to Christians to buy a house, we're going to require a special rate for them that we don't require for people who are not followers of the Christian faith. You'd say, well, you can't discriminate in favor of a faith, and you can't discriminate against a faith. This would be discrimination in favor of Muslims, would it not?
Certainly. With respect to your first point, it's clear, I believe, that if the statute or the law is neutral, meaning no one can wear coverings on over their face. In fact, in Texas, I believe you can't even wear a hat.
Right.
So you can't have a hat on.
I know that in my state, I can't wear. You can't even wear a ball cap. That doesn't. All it does is cover your hair, but you can't wear a ball cap in a photo.
Yeah, and in Texas, you can't wear a cowboy hat. So the bottom line is that if it's a general law that you can't wear face coverings or headgear to have your photo taken, I think the government has a good reason for that. This bill actually went a little further and said in public places as well, which could be interpreted to mean driving or walking on the sidewalks. There could be a little bit of problem with that with respect to identification purposes. But the flip side of that is if you would have just passed the bill saying that specific religions or people that observe a specific religion can't wear a specific thing such as a burqa or whatnot. That's obviously targeting a religion. It doesn't apply to everybody equally. It's designed to get religious Muslim women to remove their coverings, that would, of course, be constitutionally suspect on a lot of grounds, probably also civil rights grounds. But in this case, the law is simply generally it's neutral, and there is a fine line between passing laws to give special exceptions for certain religions and to actually treat everyone neutrally and be tolerant with respect to other religions. And that's why those Religious Freedom Restoration Act bills that were passed in 21 different states basically have a balancing test, which allows parties to say, wait, this is infringing on my religion, and the courts balance interests so as to protect religious liberties as far as we can without, as your example showed, giving special privileges to those based on their faith.
Yeah, because you can't do that either. And is it the case that the reason they're having to amend it to say he or she is that, well, when I went to high school, and I bet when you went to high school, the generic pronoun was he. But these days, nobody wants to say just he because they think it's politically incorrect that somehow you're cutting half the population out, apparently not understanding that in English, he is the generic. But is that the reason that it was originally written to only say he?
Certainly, it's designed to cover up, to clear up any ambiguity with respect to whether they actually mean males or not. And I would just throw in as an aside, if it was reversed, of course, there'd be an outcry that it is constitutionally impermissible to only require one gender not to wear head or face coverings. In other words, right now the statute says he. If that really literally means only men can't wear those, then you would have a problem with discrimination based on sex. The government would have to say, well, why is it okay to ban men from wearing face coverings than women? So I think clearing it up to say he or she, or that he means, you know, he or she, there's no problem with that. But the media ran with this idea that the whole purpose of this bill was to target Muslim women in burqas and for identification purposes or safety purposes. And the honest fact is the word woman, Muslim, or burqa is nowhere in the bill.
Very quickly, and then I've got to wrap up. I'm sorry, Mr. Henry, but why is it that Muslims are not willing to do this? And if they say, well, they have to hew to their religion's restrictions, actually, in the really strict Sharia countries, a woman wouldn't ever be out driving a car by herself anyway. In fact, in most countries, she wouldn't be driving a car at all. So if they have to be that adherent that they have to wear the headgear even when they get their driver's license, that doesn't hew to their religious restrictions either.
I think you're exactly right, and that's the reason why we haven't seen specific challenges to wearing these face coverings, getting driver's licenses, because most adherents that would wear the full coverings in public or outside of the home probably aren't driving and not getting driver's license. And I believe that a driver's license, a law that required you not to wear a mask or a face covering to get your driver's license or other photo ID produced by the government would, of course, withstand constitutional muster. So that may be down the road, but I think that would be constitutional for someone to say, if you're going to have a photo ID, you have to be able to see the person's face.
Absolutely. Mr. Henry, it's a pleasure. Thanks so much for your time.
Glad to be with you. Bye-bye.
That's Byron Henry, who's an attorney and constitutional scholar.